I'd been working here for 10 years now, and I still loved the view every single morning. The radio hissed with routine check-ins from other wardens. Rowan was the reason I wore this uniform. I ran my hand over the worn surface of my desk, touching the small wooden carving of an eagle Rowan had given me. When I got this job, their car went off a mountain road during a storm. What do you want to do now? Instead, he helped me through time of grief. Rowan nodded when I told him. Like he'd known all along where I'd end up. Then he'd show up at my cabin without warning, looking older than his years, but with the same steady look. I walked over to the wall survey map of the Blackwater Crown National Park, a fictional wind-scoured park on a remote northern peninsula, all boggy moors, silver firs and salt rain, my fingers running along the familiar shape of highlands and ravines. The last time I'd seen Rowan was 3 years ago. He'd had a rare 3-week leave, and we planned a long hike through the park's most remote section. Rowan had been quiet most of the day, but as we sat by the fire, he finally started talking. There are things I've seen on deployments. I asked. Sounds like you've been listening to too many ghost stories around military campfires. You ever notice anything strange in your section of the park? We know what's out there. Things we've forgotten or chosen not to see. The memory felt different now as I stood in my way station. Had he been trying to warn me in his own way? If he wanted to check something out without being seen, he'd know exactly where to go. My brother wasn't any hiker who might wander off path and get lost. Rowan could live in the wild for as long as he needed to. The big, old timberland was out there keeping its secrets under the tree cover. Cole, it's Pete Gallagher from Dispatch. Your brother Rowan missed his scheduled check-in last night. The fog of sleep cleared instantly. Rowan never missed check-ins. I asked, already pulling my trail boots on with my free hand. The area was remote, one of the most isolated sections of the park with dense primeval timberland and minimal path access. Get me a chopper if you can and call Aaron Lewis at County Search and Rescue. Pete said. They're assembling a team. Rowan Wheeler didn't lose track of time. He was more likely to arrive early than late. Wheeler solo hike Queet's tributaries 4 days. He planned to follow this tributary up to the headwaters. Then cross this ridge to explore the next ravine, I explained, tracing the path with my finger. At 52, he'd been running search and rescue operations longer than I'd been alive. We'll split into 5 teams, maintain radio contact hourly. That first day, we covered 15 miles of rough terrain, calling Rowan's name until our voices grew. No discarded gear, no tracks, no broken branches to indicate someone had passed through. Morning brought the promised choppers, 2 from the aerial rescue wing with heat cameras. They flew over the ravines in a grid pattern while we kept searching on foot below. For guys in regular clothes who moved with same alert quick way I'd seen in my brother. But the relief I felt was immense. They joined our search teams, but also did their own Searches, sometimes going off for hours before coming back to the main group. I had a feeling they were using tech or methods went beyond normal search and rescue stuff. A week into the search, we'd looked all over Rowan's planned route and searched about 5 m in every direction around it. Finding nothing was starting to tell us something. Either Rowan departed dramatically from his intended route or something prevented him from leaving any path. We're requesting satellite imagery from the days he was hiking. We gathered around a laptop as Grant scrolled through the images. We zoomed in as far as the pixels allowed. The opening looked untouched when we got there. Keep searching the perimeter. The tread pattern matched Rowan's hiking trail boots. We expanded outward from single print, bringing in specialized tracking dogs from the state police. I knew this conversation was coming. We're not giving up, but we need to be strategic now. By the end of the 3rd week, only the Gore Park wardens and Rowan's military friends remained. The media coverage dwindled to occasional updates. What do you think happened to him? I asked. I didn't say. After 6 weeks, I found myself alone at the makeshift command center, surrounded by maps covered in search grid markings and notes. My supervisor had been understanding but firm. The search for Rowan would continue, but it could no longer be my full-time job. Instead, I took all my saved-up leave and sick days, setting up a pattern would define the next months of my life. For days on duty as a warden, 3 days searching for Rowan. I slept under the same stars Rowan might be seeing if he was still alive. I checked the banks for any signs flooding might have uncovered. They leave hair, skin cells, dropped items, waste. As months passed, I started collecting info on other disappearances in the Blackwater Crown National Park over the decades. Few or no clues found. Abduction in such remote terrain with Rowan's combat training. I lost weight, slept badly, got snappy with colleagues. 6 months after Rowan disappeared, I sat in the same opening where we'd found his lone track, now long washed away by rain and time. The trees had no answers for me. People don't vanish without a trace. Suddenly making perfect sense. March brought the worst storms of the year to the Blackwater Crown National Park, and tonight was as bad. From Rowan Wheeler. Secure mailbox. Net. Subject, I'm alive. I'm alive, but I'm trapped. 47 Dig 511 194 and 124 D 328. 2 Come. Alone. Rowan had been missing for 7 months. Are you hurt? Someone could have hacked Rowan's inbox. My IT skills weren't great, but Rowan had taught me enough to follow the path. Next, I grabbed my maps of the Blackwater Crown National Park and spread them across the floor. The GPS coordinates showed a spot in one of the most remote sections of the park about 30 miles northwest of where we'd focused our search efforts. My finger ran over the contour lines, showing the area was rough with few ways to get in. What I didn't remember was any big pit like Rowan described. Something about this didn't make sense. Cole, it's almost midnight. This official business. I need it. Tonight, Pete. I couldn't find anything important in the warden logs or visitor reports. I checked some historical records, too, and only found a brief mention local tribes used to avoid area long before the park was established. As far as they can tell, Rowan's accounts have been dormant since his disappearance. If the inbox was getting emails, it meant someone was checking it. I grabbed my notebook and wrote down what I knew about the GPS coordinates. This time of year, there'd probably still be snow up there, especially on the north side of hills. Rowan had taught me good planning could save your life in the timberland. My Winchester rifle cleaned and checked. Survival stuff, 3 days of high calorie food, water purification tablets, first aid kit with antibiotics, emergency blanket, 50 yards of rope, communication, satellite phone, though it didn't work well in the deeper ravines. The work kept my hands busy while I thought about what Rowan's message meant. What kind of pit could trap someone with Rowan's skills? But under all the confusion, I felt something growing. Not theories or desperate searches, but actual GPS coordinates and a message in his own words. I sat at my kitchen table with coffee, writing a note to my boss. She'd either stop me or send a proper search team. Neither worked with Rowan's warning to come alone and trust no one. Need to take personal time immediately. I'd built up enough goodwill over the years they'd probably accept this without too many questions, at least for a few days. Not ideal, but workable. I dealt with worse conditions during search and rescue operations. As I finished getting ready, I found myself looking at the small wooden eagle carving Rowan had given me years ago. The first light of dawn was breaking through the clouds as I locked my cabin door. The rain had finally stopped, leaving the timberland wet and fresh. If Rowan's message was real, everything would change after today. I started the engine and pulled onto the maintenance road would lead me to the main highway. Whatever was waiting for me at those GPS coordinates, pit, cave, or something else entirely, I would face it. For 7 months, I'd been searching for answers about Rowan's disappearance. Now I was finally going to get them. I checked my GPS again, still 19 miles to Rowan's GPS coordinates. Morning fog hung between the old trees. My pack dug into my shoulders, packed with everything I might need to rescue my brother from whatever this pit might be. I'm coming, Rowan, I whispered to myself, the words swallowed by the vast silence around me. In summer, I could have crossed it easily, but March rains had turned the creek into a rushing torrent. Rowan's voice came back to me as I carefully inched across. 3 points of contact at all times, Thomas. Blackwater Crown Range hinterland was rough. The climb kept getting steeper, and my thighs burned as I pushed through thicker bushes. The GPS coordinates were still a day's hike away, and something about Rowan's Warning to trust no one made me cautious about leaving evidence of my presence. I packed quickly, forced down a protein bar, and resumed my trek. It was weird, like nothing wanted to grow there. Not natural outcroppings, but stones set up in rough circles, each about 6 feet across. The day stretched on. The timberland had become eerily quiet. I should have known this area. After working as a warden for 10 years, I thought I knew every part of the Blackwater Crown National Park, even the remote backcountry. My GPS beeped softly 500 yards to the GPS coordinates. The feeling prey gets when predators are near. The trees around its edges were too evenly spaced, as if something had pushed them back to create this perfect circle. In the middle stood a huge silver fir, bigger than any I'd seen in my career. The GPS coordinates Rowan had sent pointed to the exact center of this opening, to Broken Tree. After watching for 10 minutes and seeing no movement, I left my cover and approached carefully, rifle ready. I circled the lightning-struck fir, examining the scorched wood. The exposed inner wood hadn't yet begun to rot or attract insects. Behind the tree, partially hidden by fallen branches and splintered wood, lay the answer to Rowan's message. A pit, a perfect circle cut into the earth, about 6 feet in diameter. No sinkhole, no animal burrow, no collapsed cave entrance. The pit was absolutely dark inside, not the grayish void of a cave mouth, but a perfect light-absorbing dark. A heavy-duty model with a beam could illuminate objects hundreds of yards away. The beam disappeared into the void, not gradually fading with distance as physics would dictate, but ceasing to exist a few feet down, as if the light itself was being swallowed. I took some rope from my pack, tied it around a tree, and attached my backup flashlight to the end. With the light on, I lowered it into the pit. Though the rope kept going down, I let out 100 feet before stopping and gave the rope a little tug. I backed away from the pit, trying to figure out what I was seeing. Whatever I needed to decide would have to wait until morning. I moved back from the opening about 50 yards into the regular timberland, but stayed where I could still see the lightning-hit tree and the pit behind it. Night came completely. The normal nighttime sounds of an old timberland weren't there, replaced by a heavy quiet felt strange. I'm alive, but I'm trapped. But what was it? I remembered what Rowan told me years ago. The opening stayed still. Just before dawn, fog came up from the ground, covering the trees in white. The pit stayed an absolute void circle, and the fog seemed to flow around it without going over the edge. Birds finally started calling, far away at first, then closer, like they'd stayed away all night, but were now coming back. The opening didn't look as scary in daylight, but the pit was still an absolute void circle on the timberland floor. One thing was clear. And somewhere beyond perfect void, my brother was waiting for me to find a way to bring him back. The morning sun came through the branches overhead as I began my third day at the site. No tracks, no dropped gear, nothing to suggest Rowan had ever been here except the GPS coordinates he'd sent. If Rowan had found this pit and somehow gotten trapped inside, there had to be evidence. I pulled out my field notebook and sketched the opening again, marking where the pit was compared to the lightning struck silver fir. The perfect circle of void looked the same in the daylight. I need to be systematic about this, I said aloud, my voice sounding flat in the strange acoustics of the opening. I laid out the area like a grid, breaking up the opening and about 50 yards of timberland into sections. By lunchtime, I'd done about half the grid. Still no service. After eating, I kept searching, moving in bigger circles around the pit. Later in the afternoon, I started checking out the pit itself. I went to the edge carefully, remembering how it had cleanly cut my rope yesterday. The edge was perfectly round and sharp, not worn down like any natural pit would be. The stuff was unlike anything I'd seen in all my years as a warden. Rowan had hinted this pit wasn't natural. Owls, small animals moving around, coyotes howling in the distance. The silence felt heavy, like it was pushing against my ears. After eating, I pulled out my journal and wrote down everything I'd seen during the day. I checked my watch again. At exactly midnight, something changed. Thomas, help me. It came from the direction of the opening, from the pit. Rowan's voice. I felt a jolt of panic as I grabbed my flashlight and moved quickly toward the opening. I approached the pit carefully, still thinking about what had happened to my rope. Rowan, I called, keeping back from the edge. Yes, I'm trapped. I turned on my flashlight and pointed it down into the pit like before. The light only went a few feet down before the weird void blocked it completely. How deep are you? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. The voice sounded like Rowan but weaker. Would reach you. I moved back from the pit, thinking about what I could do. I could try going down, but the pit had cut through my rope like it wasn't even there. How did you end up down there? Found reports, military archives, people disappearing, came to investigate, fell in or pulled in. Is there something down there with you? They come back at dawn. None of this made sense. What happens at dawn? Just please. I walked around the edge of the pit, keeping a safe distance. But something felt wrong. The convenient timing, his voice showing up exactly at midnight, the urgency about dawn, the way he kept talking about they without explaining who. So dark. Temporary connection. I went back to my camp. The voice sounded like Rowan, but something about this whole situation felt wrong. And now a voice calling up from this impossible void, making urgent demands without explaining why. But this pit had cut through rope like it was nothing. What would stop it from doing the same to this rope or to me if I went down? I returned to the edge of the pit, rope in hand, but still coiled. I'm here, Rowan. Just lower the rope. I paused. The massive trunk was solid, even with damage at the top, a good anchor point. As I worked, I kept thinking about the voice from the pit. Rowan would understand the need for proper safety precautions. Rowan would provide clearer information about the situation. The voice called again, a note of impatience now evident. I checked my watch. I finished securing the rope to the tree and walked back to the edge of the pit, the free end of the rope in my hands. What exactly is down there with you? Just lower the rope now or it will be too late. I'm dying down here, Thomas. Then I'll lower the rope. Just lower the damn rope. The voice was angry. Now, losing the weak quality it had started with. I took a step back from the pit, keeping the rope with me. There was a pause. Now lower the rope. I'm going to lower the rope now, I said, making my decision. I pulled some rope from the coil and stepped closer to the edge, keeping a safe distance. The pit was a dark circle, showed nothing below. I began to feed the rope into the pit, watching as the end dropped into the void. The rope kept sliding down, foot by foot, going into the dark pit. Can you reach it? I continued, feeding the rope, carefully, watching how it moved into the pit. 150, just a little more. The weight increased, the rope growing tighter. It grew tighter and tighter, as if being pulled down rather than supporting someone coming up. And the voice, it was still coming from deep within the pit. Still sounding distant. The sound bouncing through the opening. I backed away from the pit, feeling scared. I looked at the pit in shock as the last of the rope went into the void. The perfect circle of void sat there, not giving away anything about what happened. I went back to my camp, thinking hard. The voice sounded exactly like Rowan. My brother would never rush a rescue. He'd never try to make me feel guilty to get me to do something. Dawn was still hours away. The voice from the pit, the rope getting pulled in with impossible strength, the weird quiet of the timberland. The pit was still there, an absolute void circle against the dark timberland floor. I stood up, grabbed my rifle, and walked back to the edge of the opening. Keeping far from the pit, I called out, I know you're not my brother. Then the voice came back, still sounding exactly like Rowan, but somehow emptier. Please help me. No, I said firmly. My brother would never rush a dangerous rescue. I've been down here so long. I asked, watching the pit carefully. Not once. You're not my brother. When the voice came back, it still sounded like Rowan, but there was something different about it. Something gave me the creeps. The air around me began to get colder. I'm dying down here. All pretense of weakness gone. I took another step back, watching as the moss around the edge of the pit began to frost over. Even though it was warm out, the temperature had to be below freezing now, but only right around the opening. For hours, the voice kept changing, pleading, then angry, then trying to reason with me. Each time, small details gave it away. As morning came, the voice got more frantic, its tricks more obvious. The first rays of sunlight broke through the trees, hitting the edge of the opening. As light spread across the timberland floor, the voice suddenly went quiet. The pit was still there, a perfect circle of void, even with the daylight growing stronger. I walked up to the pit carefully, staying several feet from its edge. The sunlight couldn't reach into its void, like my flashlight couldn't either. How the voice tried to trick me, the sudden cold, and how it shut up exactly when dawn came. The voice was real, and they were somehow connected to Rowan's disappearance. Going into pit was clearly what the thing wanted, and I wasn't going to play along. No tracks, no equipment, no signs of Rowan or anyone else having been here. By afternoon, I'd thoroughly checked the area and went back to watching the pit. Still a circle of void. Didn't belong here. Whatever was down there had gone quiet at dawn. When it got dark, I sat by my fire, notebook ready, facing the opening in the pit. The dark circle waited in the opening as the stars came out overhead. It was Rowan's. I could see the dark circle even in the dark. The laughter got louder, the sound hitting the trees and coming at me from all directions. He died screaming. But this wasn't a lost hiker or an angry animal. This was something I had no training for. I walked toward the opening, keeping trees between me and the pit as I went. At the edge of the opening, I put my rifle against a tree trunk, pointing it right at the middle of the pit. "What are you?" I called out, my voice steady despite the fear twisting in my gut. It finally answered, "Your brother knew too much." The voice paused, and I felt myself lean forward, despite every instinct, screaming to run, like your parents. My parents. The switch was smooth and horrifying. I stepped back, my throat getting tight. That's not how I taught you to handle firearms. Join us. From these cracks, something like dark smoke or ink bubbled up, moving in the air before dropping back down. The voices of my family kept up their creepy mix of sounds. The small bundle of dynamite I carried for opening rocks in emergencies. 3 sticks wrapped together with a basic fuse setup. But the other option seemed way worse. "I can be him for you," Rowan's voice said, suddenly alone. Again. "I can be your brother better than he was. I know what you need." "You're not my brother," I said, striking a match against the box. The voice now came out like stones grinding against each other. "Yeah, let's test theory," I said. It dropped into the pitch-dark void without making any noise. I dove behind the thickest tree trunk I could find, covering my head with my arms. But underneath it, I swore I heard screaming. The opening had caved in on itself. Where the pit had been, there was now a crater about 15 feet across, filled with broken trees and disturbed earth. No birds, no insects, not even the sound of wind. The perfect circle was gone, replaced by jagged edges and chaos. The void had filled it wasn't so deep anymore. I circled the crater twice, keeping my distance from the edge. The voices were gone. I didn't bother being neat. I started moving east, compass in one hand, flashlight in the other. I'd hiked these highlands in the dark before, but never this fast. Hours went by. When the first bit of gray showed in the eastern sky, I was already miles from the site. From here, I could see the ravine where the way station was still miles away, but now a real destination instead of a hope. I stopped only long enough to catch my breath and drink from my canteen. I locked the door behind me, then checked all the windows before collapsing into my desk chair. The stuff in the station, the maps on the walls, the radio equipment, the old coffee maker should have made me feel better. The pit, the voices, the explosion. None of it made sense. According to the rules of nature I'd spent my career watching and protecting. There was no report I could file, no procedure for handling whatever I'd seen. My body went through the motions, checking paths, assisting hikers, filing reports, while my mind kept going back to opening. With its impossible pit and the voices shouldn't have existed. I grabbed every historical record of the park I could find. Missing hiker, last seen near Cult Valley, 1887, I murmured, reading aloud to keep myself awake. Search parties reported hearing the missing man's voice calling for help from different directions simultaneously. Another report from 1912, 1943 Warden Hoffman reports hikers avoiding northeastern section of Hushfield Vale, claiming the timberland speaks with dead voices there. With each report, I marked locations on my survey map. A pattern showed up, a rough circle about 12 miles across with the pit I'd found sitting almost exactly at its center. Pete. It's Cole. Listen, can you pull records of all disappearances in the Blackwater Crown National Park for the last 100 years? That's a lot of paperwork. Pete was quiet for a moment. Just tired. Thanks, Pete. 3 sharp raps on my door, precise, deliberate. The other wardens knew I valued my privacy. And hikers had no reason to be this deep on service roads after dark. My rifle was in the bedroom, too far. Knife kept low against my leg. Through the window beside the door, I could see someone standing on my porch. Thomas. Rowan stood swaying on my porch, barely able to stand. His clothes were ripped and hanging off his skinny body. He weighed almost nothing, his body so light I could feel each rib as I helped him inside. "You're alive," I said, my voice breaking. His hands shook too much to hold it, so I helped him drink. A jagged scar went from his right temple down to his jaw, red and puffy like it had never been treated. He held up a shaky hand, cutting off all my questions. My brother was alive. After 7 months of searching, of Grieving, of questioning my sanity, he was here in my cabin, solid and real. 3 days ago, I heard voices. But you didn't. Collapsed the opening. That's what saved me. Places where people go missing. Holes appear where they shouldn't be. I was testing the waters, seeing if you'd noticed anything strange in your section of the park. I remembered conversation by the lake, Rowan asking about unmapped places, about areas animals avoided. I found similar accounts dating back to the 1800s, but they're scattered, buried in different files. He coughed, a dry, rattling sound. An entity. I felt sick thinking about how voice from the pit sounded exactly like my family. The pit leads to a cave system, Rowan continued. Others? It seemed to feed more slowly on some than others. When you set off the explosion, the entity was disrupted. Feeding on multiple people at once takes concentration. The tunnel eventually led to a small opening miles from where I went in. When you were down there, did it tell you anything about Mom and Dad? His eyes snapped to mine, suddenly alert. Rowan's voice had dropped to a whisper. The police report said brake failure. I thought back to the accident. It sticks these feelers on you right here. It uses what it learns to make better traps. It learned their voices, the way they talk. All those little things only family would know. No. Rowan's voice was suddenly sharp with fear. The entity isn't alone, Thomas. Rowan must have seen the doubt in my eyes. But why would anyone help them? He was shivering even with the cabin being warm. Not your supervisor, not your fellow wardens, no one. I hesitated, then nodded. After what I saw at Pitt, I'd believe about anything, I said. I went to the window and looked out at the dark timberland around my cabin. Somewhere out there was the thing had taken my brother, might have killed my parents. I spent the night listening to Rowan's broken up story. They've been here since. Before us, Rowan said during one of his more lucid moments around 3 a.m. His voice was stronger than it had been earlier, but his eyes kept darting to the windows. Rowan's fingers absently traced one of the circular bruises on his neck. He explained how they lured humans using voices of loved ones, voices harvested from previous victims. Rowan nodded. They're excellent mimics, not voices. Mannerisms, phrases, inside jokes, things only family would know. Gone now. Our family has a special connection to these things, he said, sitting up straighter despite his exhaustion. Rowan's eyes met mine. I don't know all the details. Rowan rubbed his temple where the jagged scar ran down to his jaw. That's why it's been hunting our family specifically. The information came in disconnected pieces. I sat watching him, my mind racing with everything he told me. I couldn't leave Rowan alone, not in his condition. I filled 2 glasses and headed back to the living room. Rowan, I called out. The front door was still locked from the inside. Rowan I shouted. Back in the living room, I saw something on the coffee table hadn't been there before. I opened it to find a message written in Rowan's neat handwriting. Nothing can. We were brought here as part of a larger plan. Our memories had been manipulated. But I felt like someone was watching me. No folding, no sorting, grabbing whatever I could reach. As I packed, I kept expecting to hear a knock at the door or voices calling from the timberland. I paused in front of my warden uniform hanging on the bedroom door. This place had been my home for a decade. I got into the truck and started the engine. Trust nothing in this timberland. I ended the call and turned off my phone. Each turn showed only more trees crowding close on both sides. But when I blinked, there was nothing there except trees. I turned east, away from the Blackwater Crown National Park, away from the career I'd built, away from the brother I'd found and lost again in 12 hours. I only knew Rowan was right. And for now, surviving meant putting as much distance as possible between myself and whatever waited in Timberland. I picked it up, confirmed my position, and set it back down. My mind wasn't on the day's patrol route or the group of hikers expected at the South Trail. Instead, I found myself thinking about my brother. For years older than me, he'd been dragging me into the wilderness since I could walk. The timberland will teach you more than any classroom, he used to say. His pack always ready by the door for our next adventure. While other kids played video games, we tracked deer, built shelters from fallen branches, and identified edible plants. He'd made it himself during a 2-week survival exercise, whittling away at night by firelight. Something to watch over you when I can't, he'd said, pressing it into my palm. The memory made my throat tight. Our parents died when I was 19. The official report cited brake failure, but I never cared about the details. All I knew was one phone call had changed everything. Rowan, who was 23 and already in the military, came home immediately. He moved into our parents' house where I still lived while attending community college. He'd asked me one night about a month after the funeral. We sat on the back porch passing a bottle of Dad's whiskey between us. I had no answer then. Without Rowan, I might have been lost. He took leave from the military for 6 months, long enough to help me find my way. We hiked every weekend, sometimes talking about Mom and Dad, sometimes not saying anything at all. The timberland took in our silence, gave us space to breathe when the house felt too full of memories. By the time he had to return to duty, I decided to become a park warden. While I found my place among the trees, Rowan moved up in special forces. He never talked much about his work. Most of it was secret, but I knew. He worked in wilderness survival and rescue. Sometimes months would pass with a few short emails from addresses couldn't be tracked. The park was huge with rainforests, moorlands, and coastal rim. It was easy to get lost here if you didn't know what you were doing. Even easier to disappear if you wanted to. I remembered how different he seemed then, still fit and capable, but with new stress in his shoulders, always on the lookout in a way I hadn't noticed before. 5 days into our trip, we made camp by a small lake. The night was clear, stars showing on the water's surface. You ever think about how much of the world remains unmapped, Cole? Not physically, but in other ways. I poked at the fire, sending sparks upward. What do you mean? Things don't make sense. He stared into the flames. Places where the rules seem different. What kind of places? He shook his head. Can't get into specifics, but let's say there are corners of wilderness around the world where locals won't go. Places with histories of disappearances stretching back centuries. I laughed it off. Rowan didn't laugh. He took a long drink from his canteen, his eyes looking around the void beyond our fire. Maybe. He paused. Places where the animals won't go. Unusual patterns of behavior and wildlife. No, I said, though, I hadn't been looking for anything like. The park is pretty well documented. Do we? He gave me a look. I couldn't read. There are gaps in our knowledge, Cole. I changed the subject, thinking he was tired or stressed from whatever secret missions he'd been on. But for the rest of the trip, I caught him checking behind us more than once, looking at the trees like he thought something was going to come out. Had Rowan known something was wrong with the timberland? I walked back to my desk and sat down, pulling out the duty roster for the day. Wardens were spread thin across the big park, with most working near popular hiking paths and campgrounds. The more remote areas only had a warden visit, maybe once a week, if Rowan knew this park almost as well as I did. That thought made me feel weird. Even though I couldn't explain why, I picked up the eagle carving, rubbing my thumb over its smooth wooden wings. He was special forces, trained in finding his way and surviving better than even most wardens. So, what could make someone like him disappear? The question had no answer. I put the carving down and reached for my pack. I had a job to do, paths to check, hikers to keep safe. The phone rang at 6:17 a.m. on a Tuesday. I remember checking my watch as I grabbed the receiver, thinking it was probably the night warden calling with updates on the campgrounds. Wheeler, I answered, stifling a yawn. We've got a situation. His voice had careful tone people use when delivering bad news. His hiking permit had him exiting the Gallowmere Vale Trail by sunset. Not once in all our years of hiking. It was a rule we both lived by. When was his last confirmed location? 3 days ago at the Upper North Line Way Station. He signed the log book, mentioned he was heading to explore some of the unmapped tributaries of the Dusk Pine River. Said he'd be out in 4 days. I grabbed my survey map from the wall. finding the queer shed with my finger. Rowan had chosen his spot well if he wanted solitude. I'm heading out. There now. Already notified them. And Cole, I'm sure he's fine. Probably lost track of time. But we both knew better. Something was wrong. Within an hour, I was at the upper Kino station reviewing the logbook myself. I saw Rowan's handwriting right there. Nothing unusual in the entry. No hidden messages or clues. By noon, 23 searchers had shown up. I spread Rowan's intended route survey map across the hood of my truck. He's an experienced military survival specialist, so standard search protocols won't be sufficient. We need to think differently. Aaron Lewis nodded. Helicopters are on standby for morning flights if necessary. Each team carried thermal imagers, binoculars, and tracking equipment. We found nothing. As void fell, we made camp, planning to resume at first light. I barely slept, staring at the stars through gaps in the trees above, remembering how Rowan had taught me constellations on our childhood camping trips. If you ever get lost, he told me when I was 10. Find the North Star and you'll know which way is north. By the third day, our search team had grown to 45 people. Word had gotten around to wardens in the area, and help showed up from parks nearby. On day 4, Rowan's military buddies arrived. They only told us their first names and I knew not to ask anything else. We worked with Mike, said the oldest one, a weathered man called Grant. Heard he went missing in your backyard. Thanks for coming was all I said. These men knew Rowan's capabilities, understood how he thought. People don't disappear without leaving anything behind. I called a meeting at base camp. I stood in front of everyone who looked tired after putting their normal lives on. Paused to help find my brother. We need to consider alternatives, I said. Grant spoke up. Might give us something to work with. 2 days later, the satellite data arrived. The resolution was surprisingly good. Enough to make out major landscape features, but not individual hikers. This was taken the day before he was due to exit, Grant explained, pointing to an opening near a bend in the river. There's something there doesn't match the previous days. Image. A small dark spot appeared in the opening, possibly a tent or tarp. That's 3 miles east of his planned route, I said, already marking it on my survey map. We went there right away. A team of 12. Including 2 of Rowan's military friends. No tent, no campsite. No sign anyone had been there. But Grant crouched at the center, running his fingers through the pine needles and dirt. Ground's been disturbed here recently. He looked up at me, his expression giving nothing away. We found it 10 minutes later. A single track partially preserved in a patch of mud near the stream. It pointed toward the stream, but then vanished as if he'd stepped into nothing. The discovery energized the search. The dog showed interest in the area, but couldn't establish a consistent path. They would pick up a scent, follow it a few yards, then lose it completely. 2 weeks into the search, the county sheriff called me aside. "Thomas, we need to talk about scaling back. Search resources are finite and 2 weeks is longer than most operations." "Run," but I wasn't ready to hear it. "He's out there," I said firmly. "Rowan wouldn't give up on me." The sheriff placed a hand on my shoulder. "I can keep a small team active, focus on targeted areas." The next day, half the searchers left. The choppers were reassigned to other emergencies. Grant found me sitting alone by the base campfire one night during the 4th week. "The official search gets called off tomorrow," he said without preamble. I nodded. I'd already received the notification from park headquarters. Grant didn't say anything for a while. Mike was the best of us. If he didn't want to be found, not even we could find him. "You think he disappeared on purpose?" Grant stood to leave. "We're sticking around a few more days unofficially." Even they left eventually. I needed to go back to my regular duties. I didn't accept. Every weekend, every holiday, every spare moment was spent looking through section of timberland. I got to know every tree, every rock formation, every seasonal creek in ravine. Spring turned to summer, and the snow melt filled up the rivers. Summer brought lightning storms, started small fires throughout the park. Each time I'd rush to the area, hoping the emergency might bring Rowan out if he was hiding. Each time I came back alone, the most frustrating part was the complete lack of clues. People don't vanish. Even if something terrible had happened to Rowan, there should be some trace. There weren't many, maybe one every few years. But they had weird similarities. Experienced hikers vanishing from remote areas. Searches given up after a few weeks. I kept a journal of my thoughts and ideas, filling pages with theories got more and more far-fetched. Animal attack. The lack of blood or remains made unlikely. Voluntary disappearance maybe. But why? And how? Would he manage to leave no path? The questions took over my life. My supervisor suggested counseling, which I went to enough to keep my job. The light was getting dim, and I should have been heading back to my camp, but I couldn't make myself move. "Where are you?" I asked the silent timberland. But as I finally stood to leave, I had a thought had been building in my mind for months. The lack of evidence wasn't weird. It made no sense. It went against everything I knew about wilderness, tracking, and how people act. Not even someone with Rowan's skills could disappear so completely. Unless someone or something had taken him. The thought should have seemed crazy, something I only believed because I was sad and tired. Instead, it felt strangely right. I grabbed my pack and walked back to camp, my flashlight showing the way as it got darker. For the first time in months, I felt like I had a plan. I didn't know what had happened to Rowan yet, but I was starting to understand what hadn't happened. The rain hit my cabin windows hard, matching how fast my mind was racing. Water ran down the glass in sheets, making it hard to see the dark timberland outside. I sat at my desk, staring at my laptop screen, reading the same words over and over until I couldn't think of anything else. Date, March 15th, 9:46 p.m. There's a pit in the timberland, Thomas. Not natural. I can't get out on my own. Trust no one. Not wardens, not police, not even my military contacts. They wouldn't understand what's happening here. Emmy, 7 months. And now this message appears out of nowhere. My hands shook as I checked the timestamp. Again. The message had arrived exactly 3 minutes ago. I clicked the reply button and typed frantically, "Rowan, where have you been? I'm coming to get you. Just tell me more about your location." I hit send, then held my breath as I waited for a response didn't come. After 5 minutes of refreshing my inbox, I stepped back and tried to think clearly. This could be a cruel joke. Or the thought I couldn't push away. This could actually be Rowan reaching out after all this time. I needed to check if it was real. I pulled up the message header information and started looking at where it came from. The message had jumped through servers in Japan, then Germany, then Canada before hitting what looked like a dead end. The level of tech skills matched what I'd expect from Rowan. I knew this section pretty well from training exercises. It had several known cave systems and a bunch of narrow ravines. Nothing would trap someone with his survival skills for months. But if there was even the smallest chance this message was real, I had to do something. I picked up my phone and called Pete at dispatch. "Pete, it's Wheeler. I need a favor. Everything okay? I need to know if there's been any unusual activity on Rowan's accounts recently. Bank, social media, anything." There was a pause on the rope. "No," I admitted. "But I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important," Pete sighed. "Give me a day. If you love chilling horror stories and eerie mysteries, you're in the right place. Subscribe now, turn on notifications, and join us every week for a new descent into darkness. Your next nightmare is just one click away."